They were kind enough to let me look through it, and I was immediately struck by the unusual three-dimensional music notation. I've never seen anything like this before. This is something really special. Very abstract three-dimensional curves. Even with my basic musical knowledge, I could look at these curves and imagine sounds. I really wondered where this innovative representation of sounds come from. Luckily, Mergelhef's text described the source of inspiration for his sound diagrams. Johannes Kepler's famous musical astronomical book, Harmonische Mundi. Now, I know what you're thinking. How did a copy of Kepler's book get into the hands of Moshe Najara in Gaza in the late 17th century? Well, unfortunately, we don't have a clear answer for that. But the common belief is that Salomon Schweiger, a German priest who came to Istanbul in 1576 and was the first to notate Turkish music in Western notation, brought with him several copies of Kepler's book, and they were circulating around the Ottoman Empire. We know that several copies were circulating around Greater Syria in the 17th century. Now that I think of it, maybe I should say a few words about what's Sefirot Allah. I am not used to talking to a musical audience, so it didn't occur to me to expand it. Well, Sefirot means literally counts or emanations. There are 10 such emanations in the Kabbalah. The infinite reveals itself through and continuously creates both the physical realm and the chain of higher metaphysical realms. The ancient Sefer Yetzirah enumerates 32 mysterious passages of wisdom, the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and I quote, 10 Sefirot of nothingness, 10 and not 9, 10 and not 11. No chapter in the history of the Jewish people during the last several hundred years has been as shrouded in mystery as that of the Shabbakian movement. This mystery is part of a culture of secrecy, of the Tower of the Secret, the so-called Kabbalah, that should have been passed from mouth to ear for centuries without being written down. There was this common belief that these secrets of creation can be dangerous. When they fall to the wrong hands, those who know it are obliged to hide it. In our modern eyes, this is how we can understand the Messiah craze of the 17th century. The combination of the ongoing suffering of the Jews as a persecuted minority, especially with the blood libels and the meeting with Neoplatonic philosophy and new science. To this mix, we add the metaphysical spark of the Lurianic Kabbalah after the time of Halley. Now the secret is in the open. And when the secret is everyone's, we get this anarchist reversal of everything that is the basis of the theology of Shabtai Tzvi and Natan Fgaza. I have the feeling that for Moshe Najala, the same culture of secrecy surrounds Johannes Kepler's thoughts about the harmonies of the spheres as well. In a really interesting sentence in Tzlileas Sfirot, Moshe Najara mentions that Kepler entered the Pardes. I hope you know the old Talmudic story about the four that entered the Pardes: Ben Azai, Ben Zoma, Ben Aviah, and Rabbi Akiva. One looked and died. One looked and went mad. One looked and was apostatized. And one entered in peace and departed in peace. Najala thinks that the celestial harmonies he imagines and tries to put in his course are another peak at the Pardes, and he hoped to depart in peace. You know, one of the strong reactions to the Shabtai Tzvi story was that the rabbinic establishment said that it's forbidden to learn Kabbalah before age 40, which is interesting because I am 38, or am I? Here we go. Here we are. You might have noticed by now that Najala was focused on one interval, what we call in modern terminology, 3/4 tones. Professor Regeni and I were hypothesizing and found several possible explanations to the origin of this mystical interval. The first hint is in the way Najala discusses this interval himself. He mentions it as Gimel al-Dalet, meaning the letter Gimel, the third letter in the Hebrew alphabet, over the letter Dalet, which is the fourth letter. Above this definition that Najala gives of Gimel al-Dalet, he quotes from Genesis chapter 49, Gad Gadud Yagudein, Vehu Yagud Akev, which translates to God, a troop should troop upon him, but he should troop upon the hill. The symbolism or mysticism of the 3/4 tones, the Gimel al-Dalet, is another proof of the Luwianic influence in the circles around Nathan of Gaza. We can see here an example of the ancient Kabbalistic idea that the world was created from letters, and the different combinations of letters have different mystical meanings. Beyond our mystical interval, it is important to note that all of this music we've been hearing here comes from an act of imagining, of reconstructing what European polyphony might sound like. As far as we can tell, Moshe Najala never heard any Renaissance music, but only heard other people's account of it. This is how we should understand his music of scores, a dream of someone who never heard European Renaissance music, but wanted to evolve all its rules. The consonance becomes a dissonance, synchronization becomes entropy, and the makans become geometrical tone rolls based on the mystical interval. Instead of traditional phrase structure, we get this endless chain of arabesque-like melodies. Well, of course, another source which probably inspired Najala to think about this interval is Kepler's application of celestial proportions to harmonic intervals. It is interesting that this 3/4 tones interval was seen this way by Najala, as we think that Kepler would have called it 11 to 10th relation, which would correspond to the ratio between two orbits. and is a ratio that represents acoustically this three-quarter tones interval. Well, Najala mentions in his book that he developed some of his music while playing a zurna. So one should imagine his melodies with this special nasal sound. Interestingly, he mentions in his book that he used to play his zurna on Tisha B'Av, but would only play a few notes and not a full melody. He justifies it by saying that if the Messiah indeed came, it is allowed to play music on Tisha B'Av. And if he didn't, then he didn't play a full melody, so didn't commit a sin. When we came to make this realization of the musical scores that Majara left, we had to make a lot of decisions ourselves. It's a pity that I can show you these remarkable scores. They are built of very special three-dimensional shapes that are placed one next to the other. They represent the polyphony, what happens simultaneously in the music. He used 3 dimensions because he wanted to represent pitch, intensity, and time for each of his melody. One thing that is quite exceptional about these shapes is that the closer you look at them, you see more angles in their outline, so it's quite impossible to perceive their contour. In any case, when we try to translate them to melodies, we began with basic tekla chords of Ottoman music. That's how we came to the basic motif of we also took another major source of inspiration for him, the piyut of his great-grandfather, Israel Najjar. For example, we could identify parts that are almost quotes from the piyut Yafa Dimateh, which goes something like that. and pardon my singing abilities here.
Oh, really, ricordi salire how gracious attenzione posse Offici wonderful.
I apologize for discussing such issues as I am a complete musical amateur. However, I have been thinking about sounds in the context of Tzlilei Sefirot, and I try to understand the difference between abstract sound and the sound of speaking. Of course, there are some acoustic differences, but they seem negligible. Well, the obvious difference is in the type of signification of the two types of sounds. You know, during my research, I tried some of these Kabbalistic techniques myself, and I had this experience with the repetition of words and letters transformations, where gradually text and words lose their linguistic significance, and you perceive them more like musical signifiers, which I understand as objects that signified nothing. This is how I understand Moshe Najara's spiritual project. He materializes one of the elements of redemption, that the words will separate from their meaning. You know that Nachmanides said that when the Messiah will come, all the letters in the scripture will be rearranged, as the real divine meaning of the Bible will only be revealed then. It's probably why a few centuries later, Rabbi Nachman hints that the Messiah is the creator of new music, or Ekist of Myo Ligunim. One crucial aspect of Moshe Najjar's music that we didn't discuss is the seclusion in which it was created. Now, by the time he starts in music movement, the news about Shabtai conversion to Islam as Haidut Majara's community in Gaza is Majara was one of the last followers Shabtai left in Gaza, and there he was practically secluded from both the Jewish community and from the Muslim Ottoman institutions. Therefore, we should understand his music as music of presence. One can understand is to the mystical messianic idea that everything can be different, that the boundaries between permissible and forbidden have been bleached, and so did the boundaries between day and night, between man and woman, between noise and tone. Some researchers today claim that Shabtai was the first Jewish feminist, the first liberator of women from their suppression in the traditional Jewish world. The more I experience Moshe Najjar's ideas, music, the more I see him as a liberator as well. Maybe one of the first pioneers in the long process of emancipation of all mass. And really at the one of the historical Turning to consider the Sabbathean and historical, however, they are faced with an entirely different understanding of language, not only how we understand, but often of an actual refusal to understand. Even in recent times, there has been a definite tendency to want to minimize all significance of heretical Sabbathean, with the result of no adequate investigation, great extent that spiritual theology for making sense of it. For its ultimate faith, it is impossible to withstand of the study that has been done in this area without being astounded by the amount of interest in the life. Therefore, again, may wonder, and the values of my typical of this powerful by the angry moralizing of the characterized this volume. Well, an interesting element in Najara's book is his detailed description of the ecstatic practice he developed. His meditative practice is completely tied with his general mystical ideas from which his music is built. He is obviously very influenced by the techniques developed by Avraham Abulafia that were practiced in secrecy in the circus of Kabbalah around the end of the 17th century. Najala takes the idea of using rolling of the letters and words to get into a meditative trance state. He takes his mystical interval, 3/4, Gimel over Dalet, and then 6/8, Vav/Het. He uses the two letters in all possible vowels, A, E, I, or U. In the book, he claims that after reciting all the 25 possible combinations, while focusing on the voice and the air that comes out of one's throat, the practitioner can overcome their rational categorization tendencies. One supposedly reaches the state of equilibrium, where the divisions between noise and tone, between male and female, lose all significance. I must admit that as part of my research, I tried once to engage with such a routine, and I can report to you that it is a complete nonsense. Ga. 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 Dar.
Ge. Gi. Bo. Go. Ga. Gu. Ga. Ge. Gi. Go. Gudar. Ge. Ga, da, ge, da, gi, do, gru, de. Ga, ge, gi, du, de, go, go. Ga, gu, gi, du, de, do, gara, ge, gi, go, gu, ga. Ge, gi, go, gu, du, dar, de, di, do, du, de, gar. Ge, gi, go, gu, du, da, be, bi, do, du, de, do. Go, 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 do, 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 Go.